A third effect of the War of 1812, the end of the party of the wealthy business people. After the War of 1812 was over, many ordinary people were angry because the wealthy business people in New England had not supported the war effort. There had been a lot of opposition to the war in New England because they feared the British would attack New England due to conflict over Western lands. Thousands of New Englanders refused to pay taxes or serve in the army. When war was declared, many flags in New England were lowered to half-mast, a sign that something very sad has happened. During the winter of 1814, delegates from all over New England who were opposed to the war met in Hartford, Connecticut, to protest what they called Mr. Madison's War. Delegates to the Hartford Convention discussed secession, the idea of breaking away from the United States if the war continued. The protests at the Hartford Convention were interrupted by news of the end of the war. The convention quickly came to an end because the war was over. Because their party had not supported the war and had threatened to secede from the Union, the party of the wealthy business people became very unpopular after the War of 1812. Eventually, there was so much resentment that the Federalist Party of the wealthy business people ceased to exist. After the War of 1812, Jefferson's party of the ordinary people remains the only political party in the United States until 1828. A third effect of the War of 1812 is that it marked the end of the Federalist Party of the wealthy business people. Summary. The War of 1812 had three main effects. One was that the Native Americans were defeated and forced to give up more land. A second effect was that the United States became stronger. A third effect was the end of the party of the wealthy business people. Why the Democratic Party was started. The problem with the election of 1824. In 1816, James Monroe was elected as the fifth president of the United States. In the election of 1820, no one ran against President Monroe. 4 years later, in 1824, 4 men ran for president. All 4 were from the same political party, but they came from different sections of the country. William Crawford was from the South, but he was too ill to campaign for votes and did not have a real chance. John Quincy Adams from New England was the son of John Adams, the second president. And John Quincy Adams was the son of John Adams, who was the second president. 2 men, Andrew Jackson and Henry Clay, came from the new states on the western frontier. Henry Clay was one of the war hawks who had said that the Kentucky militia could conquer Canada all by itself. Andrew Jackson was the popular general who had led his troops to victory at the Battle of New Orleans. Something very interesting happened in the presidential election of 1824. Although Andrew Jackson won the most votes in the election in 1824, he did not have enough votes to be declared president. The presence of 3 other candidates kept Jackson from receiving enough votes. According to the Constitution, when no candidate gets enough votes, the House of Representatives has to choose among the top 3 candidates. Henry Clay was not eligible because he came in 4th. But Clay, who was already a leader in Congress, worked very hard to get his followers in Congress to vote for his choice, John Quincy Adams. So although Andrew Jackson had received the most votes from the people, John Quincy Adams became president. The first thing John Quincy Adams did as president was to appoint Henry Clay as Secretary of State. Andrew Jackson's followers were angry. Although Andrew Jackson had received the most votes for president, John Quincy Adams, a wealthy, well-educated man, became president. John Quincy Adams was the son of John Adams, the second president of the United States. John Adams had been a member of the party led by wealthy business people. The ordinary people felt that they had been cheated out of having Andrew Jackson as president. The solution? Form a new political party. While Adams was president, supporters of Andrew Jackson decided to form a new political party. Jackson's supporters called themselves Democrats and began to organize a political party, the Democratic Party, which still exists. Andrew Jackson represented the American dream that a person can begin life poor and become wealthy and successful. He was born poor in a log cabin, but became a national military hero in the Battle of New Orleans. Most of the supporters of the Democratic Party were ordinary people. Jackson's support came from the frontier farmers from the West and factory workers from the Northeast. Although Jackson represented the interests of the ordinary man, he did not represent the interests of African Americans. Jackson owned plantations in Tennessee that used slave labor. The election of 1828. Henry Clay, John Quincy Adams, and their supporters also formed a new political party. They became known as Whigs. Their support came from business people in the Northeast, as well as some of the rich plantation owners in the South. The Whigs became the new political party for the wealthy business people. The next election of 1812 showed that America was changing. 3 times more people voted in 1828 than in 1824. That's because voting laws in many states became more democratic by dropping the requirement that one had to own land to be able to vote. When the western states were first established, they allowed any white man over the age of 21 to vote. Then other states also allowed any white man over the age of 21 to vote. A large number of common people, such as factory workers, shopkeepers, and craftsmen, won the right to vote for the first time. In the 1828 election, the ordinary people voted for Andrew Jackson and the new Democratic Party, which won by a large margin. As you can see by the map, all the western and southern states voted for Andrew Jackson and the Democratic Party. Summary. Ordinary people started a new political party called the Democratic Party. The problem was Andrew Jackson did not become president in 1824, although he received the most votes. The solution was to form a political party to try to win the next election. The effect was that Andrew Jackson was elected president.